This session will be monitored by Rachel Harry-Weiser, who is a community advocate. Actually, she joined us as in our board and is also a student at Harvard University. To you, Rachel.
Thank you so much. I'm truly excited to be here today with everyone for the Partnerships for the Goals panel, how the online collective can incubate change. So I feel honored to be a part of this partnerships panel today as somebody who sits at that nexus. And who but sits at that nexus is ConnectAID. And ConnectAID has a wonderful reputation. They've done wonderful work, just like some of the folks sitting on our panel today, from all different backgrounds, whether it be NGOs, international organizations, academic, representing philanthropists, as Mr. Cheah does with his school and also his companies doing green building, and then as well as Paul Walsh, Tom Gloria, who work in Dublin and Cambridge at Harvard on sustainability issues. So I will quickly go through a couple of other things. We also have Chandrika Bahadur, pardon my pronunciation, Director of SDG Academy at the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, where Professor Paul Walsh also is a senior advisor. So we have a vast panel today. And I'd like to kick it off to Gaëlle first, as founder and CEO of ConnectAID. During your 2 decades of work doing international relations, and as a senior advisor and official at the United Nations, what drew you to create ConnectAID? What was missing? What did you see on the ground all over the world?
Yes, I guess it's my time to present ConnectAID, because I didn't do it very much at the beginning. So as you know, myself, as I worked for the United Nations for many years. I was a UN spokesperson in Geneva, and before that, I was a journalist in Latin America. I studied in the US. And I've been with UNICEF in many countries. I think in about every continent. I worked with the country offices, with the regional offices. And throughout my career, I really came to realize that the work on the ground that is done by the nonprofits can be so incredible, but sometimes they just lack communication. They're just not very good sometimes at communicating. They're not, sometimes they die in the sense that they can't find funding. And nowadays, if you are a nonprofit and you don't know how to communicate and you don't know how to raise funds, you don't survive. And I've seen also the lack of trust that people can have in the nonprofits. We've all heard of, I think it's very different from one country to another, but we've all heard about stories about people that take the money for themselves, but this is so rare in a way, and so I created in 2018 ConnectAID, the International Solidarity Network, which is a combined humanitarian social impact network and a giving platform. So humanitarian social network, we're not yet at the Facebook level, but then again, it all depends on investors, and we hope that later we'll be able to create this network that is really missing, a social network just for the SDGs. But for now, we've built a pretty strong base as a social network. And we work with lots of nonprofits from all around the world, amazing partners. We send people to the ground. And our role is to connect you. And I'm talking to all the people that are listening to us today, but also connecting, the speakers that are here today to humanitarian aid and sustainable development. And our mantra, our mission is really to increase solidarity, for solidarity to become the norm. And that's really a change of mindset. So that's my drop in the ocean.
Wonderful. Well, we're so excited that ConnectAID has put on today the first ever World Summit of Social Media Influencers. And a lot of this panel is the nexus, the partnerships that are currently taking place, that will take place. And so that's a great transition to bring in Professor Paul Walsh. Professor Paul Walsh, is TED Talk famous for his SDG performance and kind of educating everyone. So what I'd like to know from you, Professor, what do SDG partnerships mean to you? And when you were on that TED Talk, what was the feedback that came from that? Did any different partnerships come from that time that you really connected with everyone online about sustainable development issues that impact us all around the world?
Yeah, so obviously I'm an academic all my life, and my perspective is going to be from that. And I'm just going to I was trying to think just to say to people who are viewing, we are very linked here, all of us, in the sense that the Jeffrey Cheah Foundation and Sunway Group is a partner with us, obviously a business and a philanthropist. It funds the SDG Academy that Chandrika is the director of, which UN SDSN. And I, in turn, work on an MSc in Sustainable Development in partnership with the SDG Academy. And we deliver an MDP association under the SDG Academy, where I work with Gloria there in Harvard University as well. So we're all very connected. But I just wanted to answer your question about the partnership, okay? And I was thinking about this. So where this all started actually was with the president of SDSN Association, or as we know about Professor Jeffrey Sachs, who's been advising 3 different general secretaries, and he's a champion, an SDG advocate, a champion of the SDGs. But all this started when he was teaching in SIPA, in the School of International Political Affairs in Columbia University. Because you're in New York, you're lucky. You're in Columbia University, you're lucky. You have things like General Assembly Week. Like there's presidents of countries, there's big CEOs of companies, there's big international organizations coming in. And obviously he's an influencer, and he talks to them on a day-to-day basis, and he wanted to share them with his students. So in his class, he would always bring them in for a chat, you know what I mean? Because we want to create knowledge, but we want to create knowledge that's needed by the policy people, by the practitioners, and so on. And we want to co-create knowledge in that sense. And that's a really important thing, right? Now, the next step was, it was before the internet came along. This is around 2000 or before Zoom, I should say, or Hopin, or these things came along. We used a thing called an Adobe platform with kind of phone links. And the whole idea there was that he wanted to create this global classroom and to have this conversation, not just with his classroom, but with his network. So, the kids in Dublin, the kids in, Africa or Asia, etc. And this is where we are today. We have a global classroom of 40 universities that log in. And again, we want this conversation between the academics, between the thought leaders, between the practitioners and the policy people. And it's just quite exciting if you think about it, that for 15 minutes, somebody can hop in this case, or Zoom in, and students all over the world can ask these type of questions. And I guess this is where the SDG Academy was born from as well, is that, look, the SDGs, it's fine to spread information, it's fine to spread awareness, but knowledge is very, very important. And the SDG Academy, in the sense, is a community of practice. You'll see throughout its books and its library and all its interfaces that it mixes science with practice and with policy, and that's at its core. And again, that goes back to the wish of Jeffrey Sachs at that moment, that we should have that conversation. And why this is so important now, right, is that so we have kids in our online course, and here's Rachel as one example, is that not only are we bringing those into our classroom, but then when we're online, we do all the homeworks, we do all the discussions. Then offline, they go into the real world and they set up the NGOs. They set up, they do the policy work, they do the practice work with the support of the SDSN network and the academics. So we are in real time bringing partnerships into the classroom. And then when the learning is done in real time, we're putting them back out there into the corporates, into the policy arenas, and into companies, and we're helping each other implement the SDGs. And this is where I think academia should be at the core. And that was the core of my TED Talk, where every one of us in our roles should be trying to influence the partnerships.
Yeah, I was fortunate to watch it, and I recommend everybody go to YouTube and and the TED Talk and take a look at it. Professor Gloria, what would your take be on this, as somebody who not only has an academic lens but has an international corporate lens as well, in terms of partnerships and incubation and what SDGs and those partnerships have meant to you?
Well, thank you, Rachel, and you're proof of the pudding for me that I'm so proud of you and being part of today and bringing this together. And to Gaëlle, I'm feeling the very strong virtuous circle here. We're all working towards a collective for good. So thank you for having me today. To build upon what Professor Walsh was saying, in some regards, the Global Development Practice program at Harvard University is an example of how partnerships really help to catalyze change. So as Chandrika has been part of the SDG Academy and the UN's Sustainable Development Solutions Network, and Professor Walsh also being part of essentially the vision of Jeffrey Sachs in creating a Master's in Development Practice, we were a little late to the party, only a couple of years ago versus 2008 when the Master's in Development Practice program started. That really emphasizes, Professor Walsh was saying, aspects of practice and policy and implementation, a human health and well-being focus that also looks at the social sciences, the economics, the anthropology, the natural sciences, but also management, project management, finance, how we get things done. And so in that template, I was able to take a 400-year-old institution and demonstrate to them that this is a master's program that needs to be at Harvard University. And so I got on the shoulders of others who created the curriculum that gets us to the next level of practitioners to solve many of the problems that we heard earlier in the talks. And this is so important. The catalyzing of an acceleration of change relies heavily on building upon all of the things that we know and understand as we move forward. And as you were saying, Rachel, my experience of working not only in academia, but also in the private sector. So the MDP program, as an example, certainly it looks at generalists in development, but also specialists in development, policymakers, but also there was a clear incentive to look at those in the private sector as well as education. And so those 5 areas of essentially the audience that we're trying to educate looks at, what do we need to educate them on to make them effective, make them successful. And this is all then that virtuous circle, right? So you, Rachel, and other students who familiar names I've seen today are moving forward, accelerating the change. And this is what is so wonderful about this digital collective. Certainly, as we heard earlier, there are limitations, but now we have an empowering group and community that will make access that much more available and affordable. This is what's so important.
Yeah, I just have one follow-up question before we move over to Kent. What issues, what content are you really seeing bubble up that those online today can take action to research, to tweet, to share, and to bring along their communities on the ground? What are you really seeing at different levels? Like, I'm an untraditional student, I'm a little later in my career. Then there's folks, earlier in the line. And then we also have we heard, youth join us today. And so I know those and the other audiences you mentioned. But what kind of, outside of climate change, what can folks look forward to in that workforce, in that private sector? And then we'll ask Kent about the NGO and other places. But I'd be curious from the academic, what we're seeing in the classroom and what we're seeing in the corporate sector emerge.
Yeah, well, as Kent, education can't wait here. What I'm seeing in somewhat oxymoronically saying it is, what is so important is each one of us have a role to play. And so what bubbles up is the discovery and the journey of where we find our strengths and where we can contribute. So that's what's so important. That is what's truly where we have to work as a collective. And that's what I'm seeing bubbling up, that we begin to see all of the worldviews that are out there, understand each other's differences in worldviews and also similarities, and then where we can contribute.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for that. And Kent, I just want to quickly apologize. I realize I didn't give you your full formal title. Obviously, we are so excited to have you working for Education Can't Wait, the UN Global Fund for Education in Emergencies, and hosted by the UNICEF. So thank you so much for being here, Kent. Obviously, you mostly communicate about education like some of our other panelists. I'm here today. Why is that important to you? What have you seen on the ground at different levels, the impact that education has on SDGs and partnerships as a whole, and what partnerships can add to that?
Sure. Thank you so much, and congratulations to Gaëlle and to Adam for setting up this conference and to this wonderful panel. It's a pleasure to be here. So I work for Education Cannot Wait, the UN Global Fund for Education in Emergencies, which is hosted by UNICEF. And we're focused on getting millions of children who are out of school because of armed conflict, forced displacement, natural disasters back into school. So obviously for my work, it's critical. SDG 4, quality education, is very important for me. And all the SDGs are important. There's no question. But how do we tackle SDG 1, no poverty, education? How do we tackle SDG 13, climate action, education? How do we tackle SDG 3, good health, education? Now, I'm going to show you my daughter's SDG football. And I don't know if it's by design or it's by coincidence, but this says the UN symbol and the Sustainable Development Goals. I would have thought they would have put SDG 1 right below that, but they didn't. They put SDG 4, quality education. Could be a coincidence, could be by design, I don't know, but there you go. It's a little dirty because my sister, my daughter plays football with it all the time. I think another question you might be interested in is how can people get out there and help promote education? I would say that it's great to follow, of course, organizations that are in that field. Education Cannot Wait, UNESCO, UNICEF, for some UN agencies, NGOs like Save the Children. The Malala Fund, you might want to follow influencers like Malala herself, find out what she's talking about, what she's interested in. Follow thought leaders like the UN Special Envoy on Education, Gordon Brown, Yasmin Sharif, who's the director of Education Cannot Wait, Henrietta Fore, the executive director of UNICEF. Follow ministers of education, follow local government officials at the departmental levels in education. And very importantly, follow teachers, follow young people. Who knows more about what needs to be fixed in education than teachers and young people? I'm the son of a teacher, so I'm a little bit biased towards teachers, but they're the ones that are really changing children's lives. So follow a broad spectrum of people. Follow Professor Jeffrey Sachs. We had a meeting with him this week. Follow the SDG Academy. Follow these people in your area of interest, whether it's SDG 4, which happens to be my area of interest, or whether it's another one on reduced inequalities, gender equality, etc. Follow the people that are in there, engage with them, and get started, and enter the conversation and share your thoughts and opinions, because we're always looking for new ideas, new ways to tackle the current global education crisis.
Yeah, I mean, those are all really important. I know there's some back. Really important point. So thank you for elaborating on that, Kent. I'd love to turn it over to Chandrika. I think, in my excitement for the panel, let me just, she's the executive director of the SDG Academy SDSN network. So I just repeated networks, but we're so excited to have you here today. And it's wonderful to have this camaraderie with a lot of the folks on the panel and, see these relationships and partnerships actually happening, in real time, and obviously with the support of Mr. Cheah and separately with other international organizations that Mr. Page works on. So, Chandrika, what kind of are you hearing from students regarding, SDGs within, the academic setting, and what are institutions really doing to promote that vetted quality content and then share that locally and online? What are you doing, and what have you seen other institutions doing?
Thank you, Rachel. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. So first, I just want to thank Gaëlle and you for inviting me to the panel, and it's so wonderful to be back with so many old friends. So this is a great panel, and it's a great event. I think, to your point of what are we hearing from students, there is and has been for now, I think, quite a few years, quite an asymmetry in terms of what students are passionate about and what students are interested in, and what happens with the rest of the actors in academic institutions. So, to our mind, students lead the change because universities are slow moving, they are more deliberative, they have been designed in a way to sort of react, I think, very carefully to new ideas and to innovation, whereas students are actually much more engaged, partly because the issues that the SDGs encapsulate affect them. They affect them in so many different ways. And so we've seen a lot of push from students and a lot of demand for more on the SDGs. And in a sense, the Academy is a response to that demand. The other thing is that we no longer in this world need to rely on institutions alone for education to happen, right? So, Melissa in the last session was talking of herself as a lifelong learner. Rachel, you are clearly a lifelong learner. And I think in a sense, everybody has the opportunity now to never stop learning because resources are available. And part of our job is to make those resources available, not necessarily in a traditional way, but in an accessible way. So the Academy, for those of you who are here at the summit who are not familiar with it, the Academy was set up to basically provide education on sustainable development and on the SDGs as a global public good. That is what we wanted to do. So what we've done is, through our network, through the connections that we have, through people like Professor Walsh and Professor Gloria, we have brought together faculty that can speak to the issues that the SDGs cover. And we put them together in courses, and then we make them available for anyone in the world who wants to learn. And what that does is that it basically fulfills what we believe is the first ingredient for influencing, which is educating. So people need to educate themselves first, because the SDGs are complicated topics. They're not simple, straightforward things that are necessarily easy to understand because of the interconnectedness, because of the, there are levels of complexity. And so for us, it was very important as a first step to give people, empower people with resources to be able to educate themselves. Once that's done, then I think there are infinite possibilities for what students can do. So we at the Academy have a reach both to the institutions, to the universities. The SDSN is a network of about 1,400 universities around the world. We have with UCD, with Professor Walsh's university, and with the Tanshi Jeffrey Cheah's university at Sunway, we have online master's program collaborations. So there is definitely an institutional flow, but there's also a direct reach to anybody who's hungry for knowledge and who wants to learn.
Right, at all levels, untraditional students and whatnot. So we were talking about blue collar, we were, different technical degrees. And so I think, the nexus and impetus where you guys kind of sit at is where ConnectAID is helping to also bring that nexus together. Because when you have untraditional learners at an academic setting, you obviously have folks who are working in the corporate world and the NGO world and all these different spaces, which make it a great space for ConnectAID to come in and to help bring everything together. So my next question then is to Gaëlle. How does ConnectAID play a role in education at that nexus and helping to create that nexus for partnerships of the goals? You're mute.
I'm going to quote Nelson Mandela, who was saying, "Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world." And I truly believe that, as you were saying, we can be learners all our life. And during the past 3 years, I don't think I've ever learned as much as creating ConnectAID. And so at ConnectAID, our strength is really communication. We know how to use those tools. You've seen all the videos that we do it ourselves. We help the nonprofits to communicate. And but we also decided to create an academy for community advocates. That's what we call our volunteers. So about twice a year, we select people. We receive hundreds of CVs, and then we train them to use social media. And Adam Rogers from our board has been really nice, giving free training to them so that we can really all be very efficient. And we also, sometimes we send reporters, so from this academy, we send people to the field so that they can go visit our nonprofit partners, take pictures, record movies, so that then we can report back to the people and say, hey, this is what's happening on the ground. This is what we have seen. And so we have, in terms of partnership now, I think, well, SDG 17, it's the last SDG, is a partnership for the goals. And I think ConnectAID is all about SDG 17. All of us, because I felt, we've been talking about, I think every session has been speaking about the same thing. We all live in our echo chamber. We all live in our bubble, and we need to get out of our bubble. And we need to be able to communicate to outside and to connect people, to connect corporations. And maybe I am myself a little bit too much in my bubble with I'm maybe too concerned with the nonprofits, that I need to reach out to the private sector, which is another world for me. But if there are people from the private sector listening, please reach out, because we need you, and we can't. No one can do this alone. We really need the partnership. Is really the key to end poverty, to reduce hunger, to allow children to go to school. And if we look at our nonprofits that we have on our platform, well, first of all, we know them by heart, because by communicating about someone, you know them very well. And they are not in competition with each other. That's the idea that we had, to change mentalities and to allow nonprofits to help each other. And then we see synergies, and they have a project in this country, and we tell them, okay, well, how about you connect with this one, and so that they become more efficient on the ground. And competition should not be in our world of sustainable development. We cannot afford to be competitive with each other. And also for donors, because of course well, one of the thing about our platform is that nonprofits can show their projects, and then you can donate to this nonprofit. But we decided not to take any commission whatsoever, and that has never been done before because of the price of the network that we self-financed. But it was very important for us to have direct donations, and in a way, if a donor, like, for example, one day is all about education, one day is all about climate change, another day is all about another issue, well, it doesn't matter. That's life. You know, this year, all we talk about is COVID, but the year before, all we talked about was climate change. So why don't we just give the choice to the people? Maybe one time they want to give to one association, another one time to an international organization, and that's fine. Just give them the opportunity to go from one to another. And instead of all those organizations trying to keep their donors, never sharing their contact information, no. So that's all about partnerships.
Yeah, that's you know, as somebody who's done business development for almost 2 decades and fundraising at various levels, you know, it's the lifeline, and academics know that as well, and nonprofit organizations that are doing meaningful work. So bridging, you know, the knowledge and the people and the engagement online and on the ground makes for better outcomes, right? And so what I would like, you know, to get a little bit more specific outside of just individuals, trusts, and corporations being involved, what outside of what is now being referred to as ESG programs, or environment, sustainability and governance, which is another for corporate social responsibility, or SDGs. There's now a lot of acronyms, but we're here focusing on the SDGs, right? And so each, you know, company, foundation are starting to implement, you know, partnerships, who they're investing in. You know, what do you think? And this is a question to everybody, and we'll do just how I see it. Chandrika, Dr. Gloria, Mr. Page, and Professor Walsh. We'll just go in that order, just kind of your thoughts on that piece of the puzzle, and then also how it obviously relates to academic or international institutions.
Thanks, Rachel. So I think this is a relatively recent development. I think, you know, and I think COVID may, in some sense, have accelerated the pivot for a lot of corporations. But we are seeing this. We're seeing this even in our own work, that there is suddenly a renewed emphasis on investing in companies that are conscious of their impact on the planet, that are conscious in the way they're treating their stakeholders. It is something, and it's a very welcome development. I think it's driven by 2 factors. One is where the money is flowing from. So the priorities of investors clearly seems to have now oriented towards an increased awareness and an increased consciousness of these issues. But the second thing is it's coming from citizens, and it's coming from consumers, and it's coming from the people that really provide the revenue for a lot of corporations. And that is very powerful. We've seen that sporadically happen before in specific sectors, but it seems now to be transcending sectors. And so it does seem like there is an expectation that companies, whatever they're selling, whatever they're offering, will behave in certain ways. And there is an expectation, and that those principles will be in line with what the Sustainable Development Goals promise. And to me, that again comes to the power of both action, the power of organizing, the power of voice, and the power of education. Because it is only when people really understand what is the impact that production processes, that supply chains can have on the planet, and on issues of social equity, and on health, and on hunger, that's when the change starts to happen. So we are seeing a lot of it. We're seeing it as observers. We are obviously then seeing it in terms of the kind of questions the research questions that universities are beginning to exchange, to sort of engage with. And we are seeing this from our students as issues that really matter to them. And so it is a shift, and I'm very hopeful about it, because I think it is a pivotal moment.
Great, thank you so much. Dr. Gloria?
Very, very broad question. So I'm going to do my best to keep it succinct, right? So, there's this aspect of, well, what are the SDGs, the 17? So epistemologically, we understand them, what they're doing, but then there's the ontology. That's the interconnectedness of them. And I say that as a continuum of how we are all educating each other on what they are and how it's accelerating and how it's just, as I was mentioning earlier, around this virtuous circle. That's this like, in this acceleration, there's, if you will, a higher order of getting smarter about them. So we can talk about it academically about, well, what they are and how they're going to be effective in the world. But then on the ground, those that figure out the various ways to implement them to their business advantage, both financially as well as from social and economic sustainability, they will win the game. And so the race is on. And that race is on around just being much smarter, much better in a competitive world. And that almost speaks to this conference. We talked a little bit about social media as a force for good, but it also can be a force for not so good. And we have to be better. Like the mousetraps that we build are going to be even better. And so that's what we're seeing. We are seeing an acceleration of companies who are front runners, trying to figure out their science-based targets. How do they get there? Not just looking at their products, looking at their entire supply chains, looking at how their products are being used. The more sophisticated organizations that build the capacity, the knowledge, the aspects of moving forward to address these problems are what we're seeing. And, to build upon what Chandrika was just saying. But also what we heard earlier is that then there's an acceleration of potentially a much, much larger divide. And that's what we have to be very careful about. And the policies that we implement, the governance that we ensure, we have to make sure that that divide does not just accelerate as well.
Thank you so much. Those are very important points for all of us, to remember and get out of our own way, right? And come together. So, Mr. Page, if you'd like to chime in, and then we'll have Professor Walsh, and then we'll have one last question for Gaëlle and Mr. Page.
Great, thanks. Well, education cannot wait. We're working with private sector organizations like Lego Foundation, HP, Verizon, and others. Because they can bring new things to the table that we don't have. They can bring new outreach, they can bring new funding, of course, they can bring new innovation to address the global education crisis. I think what's important to remember is that organizations, private sector companies, they're just collections of people. Those people are mothers and fathers. They have their kids that they care for. They're just a collection of human beings that are around a certain goal. And, we have to reach not only to the CEOs of those companies and get them on board, but we have to reach out to the people within the organizations who might be able to reach up within their organization and get their organization involved in different issues. So I think it's a terrific area of growth and potential. And of course, there are many reasons why private sector and different organizations want to get involved in the SDGs. As long as it's all for the global good, that's terrific. And I just want to follow up on one point about, there's so much out there online that is negative and bad, but there's also so much out there that is good. And certainly, I'm sure all the viewers of this panel and the whole event are a force for good. Certainly, we are doing our best to bring good. One thing that we can all bring with our work is something that's a little bit intangible but very important, and that's hope. There are a lot of people out there that are connected online that are in awful situations, whether they're in armed conflict or forced displacement. If we can provide a sense of hope, it can keep people going for another day. And that's crucial when kids are not in school and parents want them to be there. They can hang on for another day. If they know the world is behind them, if companies are coming together, if organizations are coming together, it's a very, very powerful force. And I think that hope might be one of our most important, the most important things that we drive out through our social media engagement.
Thanks so much, Kent. That was, it's a good reminder for all of us, and those who are joining, we are there with you. We're going to bring more people along, and we're excited to do so for the betterment, obviously, of the planet, environmental and humanitarian aid. All right, Professor Walsh, we'll end with you, and then I'll have one final question for Gaëlle and Kent.
Yeah, so just building on those comments. So it's very easy, to look at finance, global finance, and to look at global economic systems and point the finger, as civil society or government or academia. But the reality is that, we as people, we are all part of this. When the products we buy, the government policies that are pursued, obviously the economic system is producing goods and services, and the universities are training the students to work in these goods and services that is exploiting, let's face it, global inequality, like child labor, etc., and also exploiting natural resources, the environment as a source for natural resources and as a sink for pollution. And this is where we're in. And that's why, what the SDG project is asking us to do is that people, whether they're in their households or in civil society or in government or in corporates, have to make sure that they don't knowingly or unknowingly create harm on other people, both at home and abroad, and on the environment. They have to learn how to do that and how to work together. And it's imperative, like in some ways COVID-19 taught the whole of society approach worked within nation, but it has not worked across nation. And that is a problem. So what I would say is that, this is why I'd say emphasizing multilateralism is so important across governments, that they start to induce, and academia, because we're taxed, a lot of us are funded by the state as well, is that we do have to induce these partnerships where the values are right. And I think Jeffrey Cheah's video is very good on that, and he said, well, what's behind his Sunway group? What's behind his philanthropic? Why is he partnering with the academics, etc.? What he's saying is, we've got to get the value sets right here. We've got to make sure that in our sphere of influence of what we're doing, whether it's academic life, corporate life, whether it's in government, that we are very acutely aware of how we drive off other people or harm other people or harm the environment. And in fact, we should be doing the opposite. We should be learning how these kind of national partnerships and global partnerships do quite the opposite, where we're creating these positive links and value added for people in other countries and for the environment all across the globe. And I know that's not an easy challenge, but what I was trying to say, though, is that challenge has been met for making money. There is already a partnership between civil society, academia, the government and corporates to make the money and drive those global value chains. And humanity's already shown that we can make those partnerships work extremely well. Now, it hasn't been good for society globally or for the environment, and we have to relearn and go back to school, re-educate ourselves, and come back together in these sort of partnerships. And we have to actually, this is the challenge of sustainable development. This is the core, I think, of the SDG project.
Yeah, I think just this alone, I connected with Gaëlle through LinkedIn. She asked me to be a part of this. Then I started at school. I connected with Professor Gloria, who connected me to you. And then Kent was connected by Adam. And it grows. And I just feel so honored. Before I ask my last question, I know Gaëlle has chimed in that she has something important to ask this wonderful panel. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. I wanted to publicly acknowledge that Patrick Walsh, Tom Gloria, Kent Page are joining our team as ambassadors. And Chandrika, I hope that you and I will keep in touch, and this is the beginning of a relationship, a long relationship. But I have a question for the three of you, Paul and Tom and Kent. And so thank you so much for being part of our team, because we call ourselves the community of givers, and I think you guys fit in so well. And Kent, you actually made us connect with Mrs. Sheriff, who is also now joining us as an ambassador. I wanted to ask you, what potential do you see in ConnectAID and in the annual summits that we are having, and eventual future synergies between us that, you know, we can go so far? Patrick, maybe?
Yeah, good. I followed Adam on Twitter, obviously long before I saw ConnectAID, and it always struck me that cooperation on social media, because it's just a way of connecting with each other, could be so important. So the obvious one is just awareness. I mean, that's an obvious one when you look at a social media platform. But I guess today, what this panel is trying to emphasize, though, is knowledge, and the creation and sharing of knowledge is just so important. And that's why, obviously, academia should be involved in that sort of partnership. And then finally, you know, even when you're in the classroom, when you're online, as we are in the classroom, the offline stuff is just getting into action, like having that knowledge and then getting into action. And of course, I want to speed up that process. You know, I want to work in the partnerships in real time, so that we are, you know, let's say, you know, with UNICEF or whatever in Lebanon or wherever, you know, literally that their workers could be going to school in UCD in the morning, doing their SDG project with the camps that they're in, etc., getting the supports, and we can use our contacts to get the funds and the partnerships to actually get the projects going, etc. And this is the exciting piece. So yes, it's all about getting awareness, bringing everyone into the tent. And I know we have to do a lot of work, because it's half, you know, we're talking about an online tent and the other half are not in it, but and then also the education and the knowledge to share that, and also to help each other get into action. But none of us are doing any good unless we're using our capacities to help people in the least developed countries. So I mean, this has to be a principle that leave no one behind. So I'm happy, delighted, even to be an ambassador for ConnectAID, and just to be that academic voice that, you know, don't forget to go back to school, get your knowledge, do your homework, and then get out there and implement it and show that you're doing your work.
Thank you. What about you, Tom?
Well, to follow Professor Walsh is a tough task, but I'm gonna say one big main thing that ConnectAID can do, and I think about that when I teach my introductory course to sustainability and environmental management, is that for those who discover who ConnectAID is and what it's about, there's a true sense that we all belong. In other words, as someone like Rachel, I'm going to single out Rachel a little bit here, is where does she find her role? What does she figure out in her world of being someone who's in political economy? Where does she fit? And so ConnectAID's strength will be making everyone feel like they fit, and everyone feels empowered to do something.
Thank you so much. Kent.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Well, what I think is, first, congratulations on this. This is the first event. I think it's terrific, and I'm watching the chat line just go up with comments. That's wonderful. I know the next one will be bigger and even better. You know, thank you for bringing us all together on the panel. People I've never met. Now I feel like we're friends in a way. All these people that are viewing, and I'm sure you're going to share a recorded version of the panel discussions, and even more people will get behind the SDGs, take action. You're inspiring people to come together, take action for the global good. That's wonderful. We're all learning from each other, and that's terrific. We're not just sharing information, we're learning from each other. I'm learning right on this panel as we speak. And you know, we share our skills, our experiences, and our different interests. I have, you know, 3 SDGs which somehow speak to me more than some of the others, although they're all important. But I know that others would have 3 other SDGs that speak to them, and others would have another 3 that speak to them. Perhaps there's somebody that all 17 speak to. But the main thing is we're coming together. We're together online, and it's great to be together online. But what's really important is that together we're making a difference in the real world. This is where it's happening. So I'm very honored to be on the panel, very honored to be an ambassador. And let's keep working together to change all the things that need to be changed in this world.
Thank you so much. Chandrika, do you want the final word?
Thank you, Rachel. I agree with everything that's been said, but I do want to add one thing, which is that when our students, when our academic partners, when everybody goes online, what we need is a mega army of what I call SDG fact checkers, right? So we need people with the with the knowledge to be able to drown out everything that we know is disinformation and that is an impediment to making progress on the SDGs. And that can only happen with the law of large numbers. And that is why it's really important for us to get out of our communities that we speak to. I mean, this panel is a great example. We all know each other, we all work with each other. But I really hope next year, Gaëlle, when you do this, the panelists you put together have never seen each other or never met each other because you brought them together as ConnectAID. And so we really have to keep expanding the community and basically making sure that we don't get drowned out in a world of very low attention span and a lot of information. But so that's what we want to do the partnerships with.
That is a great point to end. And, you know, obviously we want to grow that tent, and you guys have been instrumental about bringing your networks. You know, this partnership is because of other partnerships, because of others, and all of us coming together. I really want to thank our founder and CEO of ConnectAID, Gaëlle Mogli. I want to thank Mr. Jeffrey Cheah for representing philanthropy and investing and SDGs and being an academic champion. I want to thank Chandrika also for representing the same. I want to thank Dr. Gloria for representing Harvard and the private sector and all the great work he's doing with students and untraditional students. I want to thank Mr. Page for representing the international relations space and UNICEF, and I want to thank also Professor Walsh for representing the TED Talk, taking action online in different ways, and for the work you do in Dublin with academic students and everyone all over the world here today representing many continents. So thank you, and I will turn it over to the next video.
Thank you.